I absolutely adore the ocean. I mean, the ocean means so much to me. I really love it. And I think that's why I love Rhode Island, is because of the ocean. I grew up in Africa, Tunisia, Libya, Sudan, Ivory Coast. So I was born in Washington, D.C., and my father was in the diplomatic corps, so that's why we spent so much time overseas. My whole upbringing was there, except for maybe a couple years in junior high school when we were back in Washington, D.C., but otherwise I was in Africa the whole time. America was really a foreign country to me, basically. My parents sent me to the French schools, and then I came here when I went to RISD. Well, at RISD I majored in painting, but I ended up doing a lot more sculpture. Then I lived in New York for a little while and moved back to Rhode Island. Back to RISD maybe 10, 15 years later for graduate school part-time, because at that time I had 2 little children and I couldn't do it full-time. And stayed there for a little while and then ended up finishing up in Vermont. For a while I was a figurative artist and then lost complete interest in any kind of narrative or any kind of figuration and became an abstract artist. And I think what interested me with abstraction was that it did not have a narrative and that the viewer could bring to the artwork whatever they wanted to. It was also a place for me to find within myself that was more like an invisible place that I could somehow bring out into the open. And that I found a lot more interesting than creating a story. But I like to think of it as more poetry, and other people think of music a lot when they look at the pieces. I'm also really interested in color. You know, I love to work with color. I worked with the color blue for a show, and I mapped my brain. I worked with a scientist, and I had 3 different colors of blue that I looked at. The brain waves were completely different, looking at a lighter blue and a medium blue and a dark blue. Color is an enormous influence on me. The first time I saw the paper that I was interested in was at the Corcoran in Washington. And there was an exhibition of the Ottoman Empire's works on paper, especially tugras, which are the Sultan's signatures. There's these incredibly beautiful calligraphic signatures in blue and gold. And I noticed the paper that they were drawn on. I loved the paper so much that I did a lot of research to try to find out how this paper was made. And I found somebody on the internet who still worked in this tradition, this man called Mohammad Zakaria, who does incredible Persian calligraphy. He was located in Washington in D.C. We worked it out over the phone, really. And then I did get a chance to meet him later on. The technique is first you stain the paper. I stain it with inks, mostly inks. Then I put the wheat starch on. Then I make a mixture of egg white and alum. And the alum protects the paper from sunlight and bugs. After I've coated it with egg white, I coat it with soap. And then I take a burnisher and I burnish the paper with an agate stone, and that brings up a gloss. The ink sits on top. It doesn't soak into the paper anymore. So. I'll take breaks between my drawing and just do something completely different and do a piece of sculpture. I was doing sculpture for years. A lot of stone carving, a lot of wood carving, you know, a lot of bronze work. And then that all stopped when I started my drawings about roughly 10 to 12 years ago. After having had the show at the Phillips Collection in Washington, D.C., where I did sculpture as a response to a Mark Rothko room there, it sort of brought back the sculpture. And so now I'm starting to think more about sculpture again, three-dimensional. So I'd like to bring these drawings into a three-dimensional field. That's what I'm working on actually at the moment, of thinking of how to make these three-dimensional and create an installation and an environment that you could walk through. I'm really excited about that, but I have to think about the materials. I love working with materials. I love using any kind of material that I can get my hands on. Really anything that comes across my path I think of and say, how could I use this? When I had the project in Washington, I worked at Dieudonné and worked hands-on making paper. I'm really hoping to get back at Dieudonné or another paper-making place to create paper pieces. I really can't wait for that. A lot of my process are these fine lines, and so I can't breathe while I'm making these fine lines, so it's really this sort of sound of the breath, of inhaling and exhaling, because as I do a line, I have to draw a line and it's like this, and I have to just hold my breath, and then it's done, and then I have to start again. So this is a really meditative process too. There's a terrific amount of happiness in creating the work. It's probably where I feel most comfortable, is while I'm working. There's no question about that. It's the best place I could ever be is in the studio.